Hey, everybody. As recruiters, we know that hiring can be one of the most challenging parts of running a business. Whether you're a startup looking to build a dream team or a well established company aiming to streamline your recruitment process, the right tools can make all the difference. Teamtailor is a powerful all in one recruitment software your candidates and team will love. It's not just a way of software. Hey, everybody. As recruiters, we all know that hiring can be one of the most challenging parts of running a business. Whether you're a startup looking to build a dream team or a well established company aiming to streamline your recruitment process, the right tools can make all the difference. Teamtailor is a powerful all in one recruitment software your candidates and team will love. It's not just a piece of software, but a way of working. With Teamtailor, you get everything you need all in one place: powerful analytics, an AI assistant, customizable workflows, powerful integrations, and so much more. Plus, Teamtailor is easy to use and implement with their intuitive, user-friendly interface. 94% of their users report better team collaboration, and 97% see an increase in qualified candidates. If you're focused on the candidate experience, CX is at the heart of the ATS. Just ask any of the 4 million candidates who connect with customers every month. Join the ranks of over 150,000 recruiters and more than 8,500 companies like Oatly, Porsche, and OneFlow who have transformed their recruitment with Teamtailor. Discover the new way to attract and hire top talent and see the results for yourself. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning into the Rebel TA podcast. You're here with Cassie Riley. She's the founder and chief talent officer at Moxii Talent. She's worked with companies like Block and Stitch Fix. Cassie, it's great to have you.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So where are you based and what are you working on?
Yeah, I'm in Alameda, California, the beautiful island city in the East Bay. And I work at Moxie Talent Solutions, and I'm the founder, chief talent officer over here. We partner with early stage startups when they're getting ready to focus and build out their recruiting function. So we have a lens for responsible scalability, how to focus on the right people, programs, processes, so that you can grow your recruiting function in a way that's lean, but also very powerful. And so when I'm not doing that, I'm also coaching leaders. I'm a leadership and impact coach. And I'm loving spending time within the recruiting sphere and really investing in coaching recruiters, whether they are new in their role, building out their own company, but just how they can have impact. And so that's just really filling my soul right now too. And I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. Responsible scalability. I love the way you just turned that phrase. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, particularly as we see some, not all, definitely won't be all recruiting jobs come back to market. A lot of that is a product of it's Q4 and teams are going to have some hiring to do next year. So this is the time to get your recruiter in place. So I'm not really looking at job postings as signal for job market growth or economic growth. But when I think about building a talent team, if I'm hiring a recruiter, responsible scalability is the nameth of the gameth.
Yeah.
So I've got some ideas there, but why don't you define it? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in so many ways. It's like an absolute passion of mine. I think especially as we've all been part of just the immense amount of layoffs, especially within the talent sphere. It's like the least that I think, at least for me, that I can do to invest back in the talent community. So I think when companies are looking at scaling responsibly and not just hiring and without really thinking of the impact and the long-term implications there, that you can build a self-sufficient, a sustaining function by focusing on the right programs, the right processes. And that's exactly why I got into this. I think the fractional world is so compelling. I feel really honored and excited to be a part of this next wave of how companies leverage talent in this way. And so, yeah, I just think it's a really powerful and just the right way to look at recruiting going forward.
Yeah, what the bleep is fractional?
So fractional, I actually saw a visual today too from one of my favorite communities, fractional people. It's hiring a leader, so a fractional leader, and I would just think of it as half part-time leader, part-time price, but like full impact. And I think that's what's so powerful about it is you get these leaders who have really proven themselves within their industry and so can add impact immediately. So you don't have to have the burden of a full-time head of talent, head of HR, but you can have the full impact from their leadership. And so I think that's the one, it's the power of fractional. I know it's kind of it's almost like a trigger for some people where they're like, this is consulting, but it's not. Like, you're an embedded partner. You are a part of the team and you're just as invested as a full-time employee would be.
Yeah, I think a good way of thinking about it is it's strategic plus the tactical. And there are
Mhm.
folks that have worked with early stage organizations that have climbed the org chart to be relevant, to have the experience to provide value at that fractional level, who still love being immersed in the work itself. I think in the traditional corporate landscape, like you scale up the org chart, you get removed from the work. Like you might be a recruiting leader, but you haven't touched a rec in 5 years. And that's just naturally where the financial security goes in the corporate world is get promoted, manage a team, etc.
Mhm.
What I'm inspired by are the folks that really love to be hands-on. You think about it like an engineering team. Your best engineer is probably not leading a team from a people process and having 10 one-on-ones a week. Um, but then your CTO also probably knows how to code really well and can build some cool stuff and
Mhm.
guarantee they have some projects on the side. So that's the way I think about fractional.
I also think it's like it's the leaders who are builders and who just will always have a passion for building teams, building process, building like passion and culture, and like who want to roll up their sleeves. And I think it's a really special place to be. It's like some of the most inspiring leaders I've ever been in the room with. And I really think, I don't think there's one future of work. I think it is a big part of a facet of what the future of work is going to look like, though.
Yeah, totally. Future work's going to be wild. You've worked for some really high impact organizations and been on some fantastic growth trajectories. Uh, High level on your background, like I think what stands out to me when we met is your experience at Stitch Fix. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about like what that was like? Obviously, they had like
Mhm.
incredible, just incredible experience there.
Yeah, no, Stitch Fix was definitely like, what do people say these days? Like core memory. It's like a core part, I think, of who I am. Um, I even like, I don't know, I think like the most powerful moments in my life, like I have photographic memories of. And I remember even like walking into my first interview at Stitch Fix because I'd come from Target, Wells Fargo. And here's this like Series C startup, and I just remember seeing the cooler of LaCroix. And I was like, can I have a LaCroix? Like, I've made it. I'm in tech. Like, it was just, but I joined at a really impactful time. So we were Series C. I joined as the first recruiting program manager for Stitch Fix. It was a really small team at the time. Stitch Fix, what was such a beautiful part about the company is so much of the talent was in the operations side. So like the styling team, the client experience team, and the operations, like the warehouse functions. So Stitch Fix was like, gosh, about like 2,000 employees, but only like 100 corporate employees maybe at the time. Um, and my role was really focused on like scaling us from 2,000 to over 10,000 employees within like
Dang.
those 4 years I was there. And so really focusing on like the programmatic elements within those operations teams. And again, what was so unique about Stitch Fix was I think a lot of times like the operations functions and the hourly employees, they get overlooked. Stitch Fix, they were the heart of what we were. And everything was like, you talk about the stylists as like, they're the heart, they're the art of the science of what makes for a great like styling box for our customers. And it was just a thrilling ride. I like, Brandon, we could go so many directions with this. like the leadership, like being at a company that was 80% women.
Sick.
I had my 2 kids there, having a mother's room on every floor, like just the like seeing Katrina Lake, who was the founder and CEO, and watching this small woman have so much authenticity, introversion, but like being so powerful.
Nice.
It was super cool. Yeah.
And you were there through the IPO, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
So I joined a little bit before the IPO. Yeah.
what does it take to scale like programs and operations? You talk about programmatic, you're hiring non-desk workers, non-traditional tech roles of like engineers or go-to-market folks. Like what does that look like from 2,000 people to 10,000? It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different facets of, I think, like what allowed us to scale, but also like scale with heart. And I
I
think
like
so
that.
much of it was the leaders who were all supporting those organizations, and how integrated we were. So like I think like my strongest partners like were like our ops leaders and our HR leaders, and we were all one. Like we were in the same room. We were talking about the strategy in a really unified way versus like, oh, this is recruiting and this is what recruiting is doing, or like this is HR. And just these leaders that like were really in it for the people. It would be so fun because like especially in the first couple of years I would walk down the halls at Stitch Fix in our headquarters, and I would hear just things like from our COO, like, we're going to buy a factory. And I'm like, what? Like, we're going to buy a factory like out in Pennsylvania, and we're going to learn how to make clothing. And like, now I have to staff that. But I think like that, like leading with heart and scaling with heart, and like with being centered around like the most marginalized, like, so like, how are we uplifting like the people who need the most representation? That's always where we went. And that allowed us to like scale in a really culture forward, like in values based way too.
That's awesome. You talk about like I forget your phrase you said about the heart. It was on the tip of my tongue, but is that why you named your talent shop Moxie Talent? Like, what's the origin of the name there?
Oh, I just like I've always loved the word Moxie. Like it brings out, I think it's kind of my essence. Like you bring out like a little, and Moxie doesn't include grit, but I put grit right in there.
Yeah, yeah,
Like having like the little pizzazz to what you do, and like doing it with authenticity, doing it with your own voice, and rolling up your sleeves, and just having fun. And so yeah, like I think a lot of that I'd never connected like my roots of Stitch Fix with that, but there's a lot of what I learned there, and like what I kind of developed into there, that for sure is continues to be a part of who I am.
awesome. Well, cool. Like, I think one of the things I wanted to like dive in on, which is something you mentioned in the pre-show, is your early TA work as a national service member.
Mm.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I don't know, like it's funny because now it's like it's topical again. I think of the folks who are graduating in 2024. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit better this year, but graduating from college in the recession was wild. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I don't operate in paralysis analysis. Like I'm a go. I'm like a where can I go? What can I do? I've never looked for the perfect opportunity or the perfect like amount I'm going to be paid versus like I want to have impact. Like I want
Yep.
to have impact now. And so when I graduated, there were no jobs. I was a business major, a psych minor. I thought I wanted to be an event planner. And so Obama had just invested millions into AmeriCorps, and there were a lot of jobs there. They paid less than $12,000 a year. So like I lived off of $12,000 a year. I made it my motto that I was going to like live within my means and make it work. I went to school at Gonzaga University, which is in Spokane, Washington. I'd moved back home, and then I got this job through AmeriCorps, and I moved right back to Spokane.
Cool.
And yeah, I worked for Volunteers of America building out their programs for a campaign called Our Kids, Our Business. And then I also did event coordination for, within the nonprofit sphere. So I was raising money for these events, and just like learning about a whole different way of doing things in the nonprofit world. And it was definitely something that I think like gave me a lot of grit, like for what I would do next, and also like a ton of experience
Oh yeah.
in that just little year that I was in that role.
So I was a national service member as well through AmeriCorps VISTA
Uh-huh.
before I got into recruiting, working in a development office, managing a database, doing donor relations, public speaking, PR, all of that. So yeah, I love when see folks that also have that national service experience, because we've seen this polarization of patriotism. And like, I don't think patriotism and being invested in the good of the Commonwealth is a partisan issue. I think
Yeah.
what it comes down to is young people can find that grit, that empathy that you describe having built from that through those types of national service programs. And I think the economy we're in right now is a perfectly suited economy for that, to rally around some sort
Yeah.
of bipartisan national movement, get more patriotism going. So yeah, that's cool to hear.
Yeah. No, I think like again, like going back to that photographic memory, like just the different, like my office was right above a teen homeless shelter. And so like I think it's so important, like whichever way you give back or just how you're in service to others, like especially like dedicating yourself to that at some point of your career, and then finding ways that you're like threading that through like throughout your career. But perspective, like
Yeah.
what amazing perspective that you get from roles like that, from being in situations like that. So it is not often I meet another AmeriCorps VISTA member, so that's awesome. Yeah.
And it ties into recruiting in general. Like, recruiting is humble work. At the end of the day, it's an art and a science. We've seen a lot of science in the market with tools and tech bloat. But really, what I think is going to win the day is the art and the craft of influencing human behavior, understanding people's motivations. Good recruiting is also just having an encyclopedic pop culture reference so you can connect with candidates.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it's a human centered function. I think the people who fall in love with it, who do really well in it, are the ones who they're in it for the connection. They're in it because they have this passion for others, for hiring managers, interview teams, candidates, and just like the overall experience for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the science of recruiting then. What are your thoughts on like the market for AI solutions in recruiting right now? What are some tools you've seen, or just general ideas you have about the application of LLMs in recruiting?
I feel like we're just scratching the surface. I think what's so interesting is my experience has been there's a lot of fear around it. I think usually you hear, I mean, with all functions, but I think especially in recruiting, like the march has been AI is going to take our jobs, or there's the other side where people are saying AI is not going to take our jobs. And I think that there's going to be an in between, as there is with most things. But where I think it's so interesting how one, there's like some exploitative behavior, where I think like AI and the people who are using it from like a candidate perspective, like sometimes are exploiting where there's not great interview processes or controls in place, and so you're seeing fake applications, fake interview, like some of that, which I don't think we're seeing at like a huge scale, but probably at some of the bigger companies, like they're starting to see that. And then on the other side, I'm still not seeing like a ton of recruiters who are like, oh, this is how how I've actually embedded AI and the unlock it's having. You're hearing a lot of companies saying, here's how it's going to be an unlock. But I
Yeah.
haven't seen any use cases where people are like, oh, and this is what we've actually done because of it. So I think we're still a little ways out from that. But one of your posts I thought was so interesting was on decentralized identity and like the blockchain with candidates and like how we're going to use that. I think that is like it's so imperative right now. Like the fact that we are still only verifying someone's credentials at offer is such a waste of time
Yeah,
um,
great call
in
out.
this world. So like how we can like front load that, I think that's the future. I think that's like the end of resumes, which like I'm here for. And so I think there's going to be a lot of fun things that come out from it, hopefully sooner rather than later.
100%. You mentioned or alluded to that you worked on this at Block. Can you share a little
Mhm.
bit more about that?
Yeah. So my last role before I started Moxie was leading recruiting for emerging businesses at Block. So Block, which is formerly Square, had at the time I was there 4 startups within the company. And so not only were my recruiters focusing on recruiting for those functions, but we just kind of like leaned into the incubation aspect of our team as an incubator for like all different types of processes at Block. So we were testing out different ways of doing things within the talent sphere at Block within my team. One of the things that we had started talking about was in partnership with one of our businesses, which is called TBD, which stands for To Be Decentralized. And it was all about decentralized identity and exploring the impacts there. And so we had started talking to one of the engineers there about building a decentralized identity based ATS and what that would do. So, like, when you think about, and I'm like, I'm going to try to do this in layman's terms because, like, that's all I understand too. But when you think about like owning your identity, one of the easiest applications I look to is like your Apple wallet or like, any sort of like virtual wallet. And so like how you could apply that to like a job seeker. So like you own your identity, it's been verified by the companies you worked for, by the state. So like you've had all this like employee verification process, you own it. And when you apply to a role at Block, that you would grant permissions based on what Block needs to know.
Mm.
Also, if Block was like, hey, we have a project presentation that we want you to submit something for, you have your ownership over that project. You grant Block access. And also, when it's over, you take it back.
Oh,
Because I
that's
think
cool.
that's another thing that like companies kind of exploit too sometimes with candidates. But if we could do that like at scale, one, like what an amazing use of recruiters time that like they're only talking to people who like actually are what they say they are, and we're
Yeah.
not like doing that at the end. So I think that's just like I hope someone does that soon because I think it would just be a game changer, like have so many trickle down effects too.
Because we make these assumptions about folks. If you work in early stage startups, you're like, oh, okay, you've got your hit list of companies to target if you're working for a client. And if there's only like 1 or 2 people that had that job title at that company and it's a 200 person, series A, series B company, like we make this assumption that it's like, oh, the product manager was then responsible for the product development and all of the milestones and skills and
Mm-hmm.
experiences needed,
Yeah.
because what we're seeing is that there's only one of those people who have done it, and we think it's you. And then the
Mm-hmm.
interview process is really an exercise in confirmation bias. I like this idea of surfacing relevant projects and experience at upstream funnel stages
Yeah.
versus tucked in mid funnel and then verifying that against some references and potential work history at the end.
Yeah. I think just like the applications for it, like that's just the tip of the iceberg with it, but also just how empowering for a candidate too. I always like to go to like, how does it feel as a candidate, when you're doing these big projects or when you're, giving a company this information about yourself. And so the power that a candidate can have too from taking some of that back, but also like the interface between the candidate and the company, that the company can share information too in a very different way. So I think just like the engagement of candidates in the interview process and for interview teams would be like exponentially better applying something like this in the future.
We talk a lot about candidate experience, and part of the candidate experience is in the operations of who owns the data.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw last month Ashby released a product feature where they're enriching the data of resume submissions within their database. Ashby
Mhm.
is not sponsoring this podcast. It'd be a lot cooler if they were. But the idea of enriching candidate data from the ATS is fascinating because the resume, where they're getting the data from, is usually a static object. It can literally be a scanned piece of paper that goes into a specific requisition. But what they're saying is, like, if you applied on, September 1st, 2024, well, there's going to be enriched data about the candidate's work experience in that ATS when you go to query the database at that company, say in September of 2026, 2 years later. And then there's going to be this conversation of like, well, at what point did the candidate opt in with their data
Mhm.
for a specific job? Candidates are typically motivated because it's financial security. They don't mind having their work history data floating out there because it could lead to a better job opportunity. But I think it's worth talking about in general who owns this data.
Yeah. And I think just that resumes are so static in their current state too. Like where if you have something that's like a living, breathing document that the candidate's controlling, and if they do want to still, be in choice with a company about them having their information, that they're owning that and that it could be updated in that way. I think it's a compelling way, I think, for the future of resumes and just like how we look at people overall.
Right. And there's probably some like terms and conditions that'll be opt in or opt out.
Mhm.
But we're at this fascinating precipice of an evolution of HR tools. I've called this the third wave of hiring. And I'm curious to see more case studies that are rooted in outcomes at some of these conferences and events versus just like, hey, here's our theory. This is the product marketing material. Here's the vendor sponsoring the talk or the vendor talking directly in a paid spot on stage. I'd really be curious to see more of the long tail outcomes of some of these tools. We're starting to see it a little bit. Like there's a big showdown right now between Paradox and Fountain for
Mm.
their applicant processing. Their two marquee accounts are UPS and FedEx. So they're going through seasonal hiring. UPS is going to hire 100,000 folks between now and the end of the year. But if you go on the UPS careers page, there's like a big call to action that says like get an offer in 10 minutes. So it's really
Uh-huh.
cool to see that like Fountain is powering this experience. Um, what are your thoughts on some of the tools that have gone up market and enterprise?
I think it's an interesting call out you have on just the actual like what's actually happening like from these tools and like case studies that show the impact. Um, that's fun to hear about Fountain because we used Fountain. We were one of I think the original piloters of Fountain at Stitch Fix because we had so much high volume hiring. And I know that they still use them and that they're fans of them. Um, I think what's interesting about these different tools and part of like with Moxie, that like responsible scalability, so many companies invest in too many tools and then the implementation just fails or people go back to the fail safes. And I think, you hear about some of the tools that are amazing, like Find Them, Seek Out, and then I've also heard, and I won't name any companies, like implementing these tools, and then the recruiters still are going back to Gem and back to LinkedIn because like that's what they know. And so I think like the focus on implementation, and I think also the focus on the actual output from these tools. Like I think we haven't talked about quality of hire yet, but like that's one we've been talking about for years. Like,
Yep.
but who has actually had success, like real success in being able to quantify quality of hire. So
Yep.
I think it's just it is something that the talent function, like we need to do better with this, like on measuring that ROI, reporting out on it, um, and just like really, really measuring the success of some of these big tools that also are very expensive. Um, I do think like the ones that like I've heard, feel like tried and true at this point, like Gem, I know is beloved. Like my team loved it. Um, I would love to like, hear more in the years to come about tools like Find 'em and Seek Out, who are really like leveraging AI and the power of AI to source candidates in a different, more powerful way. But I think it is like the integration and successful implementation that's still, I think it's a big problem point for most recruiting teams.
One of the things I'm observing is a lot of founders and a lot of vendors are having these parallel epiphanies of how they can apply an LLM API call to sourcing or to candidate screening. So there's like tons of market parity, even at the emerging stage of discovery where we are at. When I think about the adversity recruiting has seen from an industry perspective, tremendous layoffs, all of this like do more with less talk. There's been this index on the science of recruiting, and recruiting is an art and a science. A lot of these tools and AI and fancy marketing, which the FTC is cracking down on, we could talk about that. It feels like a trick play almost. And excuse the sports analogy, a trick play works sometimes, but in moments of adversity in sports, the great coaches, the great players, what do they focus on? They focus on fundamentals. What are the fundamentals of great recruiting? To me, that's the art of it. And I think art is going to win the day. Yes, I'm deploying AI in my stack. Yes, I talk to founders when they hit me up for product feedback. When it comes to recruiting as a field and a job, like I'm in it for the people. When this thing becomes like full on AI and I'm just managing bots or some sort of agent, like I'm out. I'll go do something else. As a aging millennial, I really enjoy some of the elements of life that are a little bit more analog. And to me, that's human connection. That's the reason I started this podcast, because I wanted to spend time talking to folks that were out there that had experiences like my own. But to me, like nothing beats getting 5 miles from my house in the woods and being out of cell service or talking to a neighbor or learning something new. And ultimately, like when recruiting is just AI bloat, I'm out.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you're talking about like the human experience. Like that's just like what makes us like the most special parts of being human. And I feel like we're seeing a lot about like soft skills and like the importance of soft skills. And then I also like soft skills just needs a major rebrand. I think I've seen a few things about like just skills. Like it's who you are. It's like what you bring to the table. It makes someone special and unique and how you connect. And I think the great recruiters, like the great people in talent, I think they're just going to get even greater, like because of AI. And then I do think that there are folks who, just like in any industry, like are more of the science. And I think that's going to like, they're going to need to adapt because I like, and I was talking to someone this week even who was like, well, AI will be able to mimic that someday, like the soft skills. And I'm a big believer that like no, like I choose to believe no on that. And like and I only want to work with companies that like believe that that the human connection and component of what we bring to the table is still incredibly important. And like that marriage between the art of who each of us are, what we bring, how we connect, and then like the science of like doing it even better and like automating some of the tasks that are like more bot like, or that could be like economies of scale so that we can focus on more of the connection. Like that's what I'm excited to see. And I think you'll see companies in both veins, and people need to just be eyes wide open with how companies are talking about AI. Like I'm always a believer that like you can tell everything you need to know about a company through their recruiting process. So like how are you being treated every step of the way of that recruiting process? That is an indication and a reflection of a company's values come to life. And so I think the more people do that, like in this age, the more you're going to get insight into companies, how they're handling technology in this new age too.
100%. When I think about where we are now, 2 years after ChatGPT was released, the first predictions were like, okay, this is going to eliminate the administrative coordinator, associate level roles that are earlier career. And that's a problem because we need to continue to grow the workforce. HR and recruiting is very much a tribal business group from the work we do, and tribal for lack of a better term. It's, passing down a lot of knowledge we learn through experience.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've been thinking a little bit about the digital transformation of Gen Z. And the reality is, like, there's just going to be new job titles in the market here in a couple of years. And Chris Long actually has done a lot of great research in this area, and he's a good person to follow. If you don't follow Chris, he runs Elevate. He's an industry personality. He's got a couple of job titles that sound kind of cool. So shout out to Chris. It's Senior Director, Conversational AI, HR Responsible AI Program Leader, a
Ooh,
workplace futurist, and an AI powered employee sentiment analyst. I love it. Chris, the
nice.
optimism.
Nice.
These are like real fun, splashy jobs. Then he
Okay.
actually goes into like what the job will do. So it's like there are people out there who are far more brilliant than I, but I think this is a conversation of evolving recruiting in the same way that HR evolved to people operations. And I would actually love to see like a split where recruiting breaks off from the traditional HR people org chart, because it just, I think, diametrically operates at a different way, that it needs its own business unit.
Yeah, I mean, I think like what you were saying too, like really strikes a chord for me because it's part of like how I've structured my business actually, like with whether it's Gen Z or like what is it, Alpha, who's coming up next very soon after, like
Yeah, 5 years
this
from
new
now.
yeah, like this new future of work that like I believe in with my whole heart and soul, like flexible workspaces, work when and where, you do your best work. I feel so good about that for where I'm at in my career. When I started my career though, being in person, being in the trenches, learning through osmosis, I wouldn't give that back for anything. And it's absolutely part of who I am today. And I worry, like I worry about the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha that, won't be in person or absorbing in that way. I think like companies aren't investing in leadership training in the same way that they used to. They're not investing in the people skills for their future people leaders. And so part of like being for myself, like being a leadership and impact coach is focusing on that, like that art of like, who are you as a leader? Like what's your authentic voice? Like, how will you really like develop into like who you're going to be as a leader long term? And I think so much of that is the connection and being with someone who's going to give you feedback in person and live, be candid. And I don't see that as much anymore as I saw like early in my career with like the candid feedback, that really being invested in that way. A lot of my work right now is with like recruiters who either are like, at a startup recruiter team of one, they're a little bit more junior in their career, but they need to be influencing at the C-suite level. And they've never done that before. And who's investing in them? Who's showing them that way? And who's also going to like pay for that for them to
Yeah,
like be invested in that way? And so um, it's something that I'm really dedicated to because I feel like, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am like now without that investment in myself that I had very early on in my career. So I don't know. I need to think more about like how I can like expand that like to more people because right now I'm feeling like it's within my sphere, but it's a big deal, I think, for these next couple of generations that come out. Also, to your point, as an aging millennial, so like maybe I don't know, I'm like looking at this in a different way because I'm so appreciative of that experience I had early on in my career.
100%. And I love the way you talk about learning through osmosis. I think there's also tremendous value in learning through doing. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people over index on the need for L&D, training, coaching, mentorship. Sometimes I like to motivate people to just like go out and do it, formulate your own opinions, learn it through failure.
Mhm.
Particularly when folks hit me up and they're like, "Oh, like, what's your advice on going fractional?" Um, and I think that's one of the things that sets folks apart in this market right now is the ability to just like go out, learn it, do it. We see folks that are building in public, online as well with their new businesses. But one of the commonalities I hear from folks that go fractional, and while it is an ethical and sustainable way to identify high leverage talent, bring them into your organization for a surgical need, is the fulfillment through not having the ability to ingrain oneself in those longer lasting relationships with a team. So to me, from a sociological perspective, it's like, man, how do we flourish that need and desire to give back and to support other people and pass the economic ladder down to a generation that may not be as well off as their parents?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm just a big believer in having introspection on like what that means for each individual person. I actually just wrote something on this, like on burnout, because we're seeing it everywhere. We've been seeing it for years, but like what what introspectively like fuels each person's own fire, and that's going to be a different equation for every single person based on who you are. And it's really worthwhile work to spend time thinking about that, because especially like in the fractional world or in the consulting world, like freelance, like wherever you're kind of embarking on your own journey, like going into it also with a balance of how am I supporting myself through this, and how am I giving myself grace, and just lots of love like as you go through it. For me, I created this equation. There's this book called Emotional Equations, and it's by, oh my gosh, it's by this guy Chip, who I think was the CEO of Kimpton Hotels. And so I like to think in emotional equations of like what plus what is going to make me feel X outcome. And so for me, um, I know that for myself, like I'm fueled by connection. So like my equation is community plus like nature, and just like having perspective, like space. I'm so insignificant. Like this is just a little problem. Plus relationships. Like that's my emotional equation to make sure that like I'm taking care of myself. And I've seen a lot of people in the space I'm in feeling that way. Like it's lonely. It's, the road, just like I feel alone. I I have felt the most connected, the most empowered I think I've ever felt in my career, like right now, because of that like emotional equation. I have
Nice.
never invested so much in my community like than I have now. And connecting when you put yourself out there, which is vulnerable, and being like, I'm doing this, I'm doing my own thing, or like I'm trying something different. This is my own voice. People gravitate towards that. And
Yep.
some of my favorite people, because I've posted things or something stupid, like people have been like, I didn't know you were doing that. Like, let's connect. And guess what? They've been some of my favorite people that I used to work with are now doing this. And it's just these organic connections that by putting yourself out there, you get to make. And it has been like just soul filling. It's been amazing to just connect in that way and uplift one another. In a way where we're like, we can do this, like we can do it together, and we're doing it differently too.
Yo, Cassie, you are my people. Hey, congratulations for having that. Not
Thank you.
everybody has that. So if you have that, hold on to it
Oh,
dearly,
well, I've
cherish
worked
it.
for it too. Like it's not like it
Hell
just
yeah.
came to me either. It's like it's scary. It's scary to be like, here I am. Here I am in all my, cassiness. And it's freeing and it's scary, but like it's work, like you got to work for the things that you love. And I'm here to do that work and to be scared and also fulfilled too.
Well, thank you for doing it. Thank you for putting yourself out there. How can people stay in touch with you and the work you're doing at Moxie Talent?
Yeah, so you can go to my site. It's Moxie, Moxii.com, spelled weird, just like my name, Kasi, or LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest. I am really committed to responding to people and interacting there. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming on the pod and thanks for carrying the torch.